So, welcome everybody who's tuning in. It's Daniel Foor. It's sometime in February 2020. I'm here on traditional Salagi lands in Western North Carolina and taking a little time to share about the upcoming Foundations of Ritual course that begins April 2nd, and to answer any questions that folks have sent in already or might want to ask during the half an hour or whatever it is that we're here. Let me say a couple things first off about the offering itself, the course. It's an 8-week course that we offered for the first time in the fall of 2019. And people have been nudging me to make just like a foundations course for a while. And I resisted it because I thought it was not boring, but like basic things that people could engage in other places. And then I actually slowed down to do it, and I had a good time with it because I found myself trying to share with others things that I wished people had taught me along the way, things that I've had to piece together in a really piecemeal kind of way, and really enjoyed the attempt to speak to topics like boundaries, prayer and invocation, the just relational attunement that's required for animist ritual. And so the course is, in a sense, it's about ritual foundational technique, if you will, but it's really the fundamentals of a relational earth honoring worldview and how that set of values of relationality gets put into practice through ritual, and how to think about ritual, even more so-called advanced or demanding forms of ritual, how to really think about it and know what skills are called for in the moment, how to amplify or expand into a state of trance, and how to dial it back when it's too much. We talk a lot about relational etiquette and offering practice and ways to tend over time to a connection with ancestors or the land or whatever it is. So have a good time with it. The structure is 8 lessons once a week. Each of those has a pre-recorded lesson, which I thought was going to be a half an hour, but they're really more like an hour. So there's a lot of, once I got started, there's a lot I have to say about it. I've been steeped in these things for 20 some years. And so they're content dense in that way. So there's an hour plus, say to saying, yeah, they're long lessons. And in addition to the pre-recorded lesson, we also have an hour or an hour 15, I believe it is, live interactive call with each of the lessons where we can discuss what arises from the embodied practice that goes with the lesson or anything else related to that. So there's about 2.5 hours of either pre-recorded or live engagement for each of the topics. And there are also readings and additional invitations for homework and deepening that go with each of the lessons. So in that way, it's pretty thorough. I enjoy teaching and trying to help these things around ritual that are often implicit or embedded but not spelled out to be learnable for folks who really want to become more proficient ritualists. And that it's some of the really heartening feedback that we received from the first time through the course in the fall is that people, even who have been doing ritual for a long time, enjoyed the fundamentals being just talked about and spelled out in a way. And that's been my experience as well, whether it's being in West Africa or in a sweat lodge or in a pagan ceremony or praying heads to butts in a mosque in Egypt or whatever it is. People aren't like, oh, hey, now we're going to do this prayer, and this is kind of the skills needed to really make the most of it, or this is why we're doing it. A lot of the experience around established traditions of practice is implicit learning, which is great in a lot of ways, and especially for Western-minded folks, being able to just talk about what's going on and what the assumptions are can be a relief as well. So that's what the course is about, and it's intended to complement the depth course material in animism or ancestral practice that is also available through the site. So let me go to some of the questions that folks have sent in because they reveal a bit about how we'll approach the course. And yeah, so, and I want to honor people sending a question. there's one basically from someone who is sharing that he's 60 and has a real longing to practice, but also feels a lot of block around it in his life. Is this attention to daily ritual, daily practice, something that will be in the course? Totally. Yeah, absolutely. The material is starts out kind of meta or an overview, but is very pragmatic and about how to get to practice. And one of the general strategies for that is to see what's at the heart of practice itself. And the way that, at least I approach that, a lot of it is relational. So is your practice about attuning to your ancestors, to the earth where you live, to the elementals, and being willing to slow down and say, well, what are your assumptions about practice? Because speaking aloud to your houseplants could be a really deep practice if you allow your perception to include them in who is kin or who your roommates are. So we are going to talk about that. And it is a space for practical questions about how to get into practice and actually have the practices that you're doing be more effective. Because sometimes it's not bad to do it, but sometimes we just repeat a practice. There's actually a lot of goodness to it, but it's worth slowing down and saying, is my meditation or my prayer practice or my ritual work, is it efficient in the sense that I'm actually, like if I gave a little more time to being dropped in with my energy before I sit down to meditate, perhaps the depth of what's happening would be really improved upon. So considering things that we're not always taught to consider can optimize the results, frankly, of the ritual you're doing, because it takes a lot of effort to actually sit down and do some stuff sometimes. So we should make the most of it. Another question comes in. I'm wanting to deepen my connection to ritual and ceremony in order to hold space more effectively for others. Is this course a good match for that? And then a different question, if I step in and I don't like it, am I able to opt out? So yeah, for the second question, yes. If you sign up for the course and you engage a lesson, within the first 30 days, you can step out and get a full refund. So we want to, we honor people. If you don't like me or the material, whatever, it's fine. You will give you a refund. And in terms of the intent to deepen one's capacity to hold space for others, yes, it's also good for that. And one of the ways it's good for that is knowing how to talk about some of these things. And sometimes you might be someone who instinctively has the understanding of what's needed, but you've never had someone model talking about it. And so if you're in a role of holding space for others and you don't know how to speak in a neutral way that meets people, then you could lose them even though you actually have the capacities to meet them well. So some of it is about the animist pedagogy of the, like, how do we teach this stuff? How do we learn it? I'm really interested in what works to transmit these understandings about ritual, because ritual itself in a lot of ways is a training in etiquette. And it is an implicit way of transmitting generationally good manners between humans and other than humans. So yeah, you'll learn how to hold space more effectively for others by being able to break down some of the constituent parts of ritual and be able to really think about that. And how to establish connection, and once you've established it, how to sustain it and how to intensify or down-regulate that intensity in a way that's relational. A reminder while we're here is that folks can ask questions. So you can do that in the chat, or I believe you can do that on Facebook as well. If folks are listening on Facebook, it's kind of surreal to be transmitting there. But Sada's tracking that. Thank you, Sada. Another question from someone, I won't share the names for some of it's more personal, but the person writes that they were diagnosed with bone marrow cancer. Could I say anything about ancestral inheritances in cancer? How could I work with this, I think being the ancestral work, to potentially heal myself and the ancestral trauma? Yeah. So kindness for one on the diagnosis. That's a lot. Respect. I don't hold the view or ever promise that any given ritual or ritual engagement is going to have any specific kind of effect. I think it would be dishonest to presume that, period. It's beyond my ability to know what the impacts would be. I don't have the view that just because something as obviously ancestrally connected as bones is the manifestation point of the cancer, that it's inherently, definitely ancestrally connected. That certainly feels poetically and kind of instinctively true, and it's a very understandable connection. But I don't have the view that all challenges are ancestrally sourced necessarily. And but if it is ancestrally sourced, if I were looking at a diagnosis of that level of intensity, I would want to jump in with individual session work with a practitioner who you feel good about. And there's a directory of those folks on the Ancestral Medicine website. And I would want to first make sure that there are not things in my field or body or energy body that are unhelpful or that are foreign. So that starts with boundary practice for one, because there's any kind of illness or intense body condition renders us a bit more vulnerable to external unhelpful influence. So I would start by giving some attention to boundary practice. And then you want to ask through the diagnostic process, how much of this is ancestrally sourced? And the elements that are, if some of it is, then to systematically start to heal those up and address those. And that doesn't, and that's possible. So that systematic process for that is probably the most useful thing I've done on Earth so far, is to create a methodology for that. So that is a strong suit, and the work with the practitioners is the most efficient way to dive right into that kind of repair work. So I do recommend it if you're called to it. Healing doesn't necessarily mean we're going to live longer, one way or another. There can be a deep healing that results in joining the ancestors sooner than we anticipated. So I don't mean to presume in any way, I'm not presuming intuitively to speak to this person who wrote in with the question situation, but to say more generally that it's important to not equate healing with longevity inherently. And we are creatures of many lifetimes, and the work of healing the ancestral field that we're connected to allows for the transition to the next stage of our journey to be more easeful, typically, because they're able to receive us. And so it's good prep for death, whether that's in a week or in 20 years or 50 years. So, yeah. And it's a little bit, it can be a little bit new agey or something, but I do find that there's value when a situation is challenging in life arises to ask the question, what am I being invited to learn from this? Or how am I being invited to grow? What's the opportunity here? I say it's a little new agey because it can imply that the answer is individual or personal when it may actually be a bigger systemic dynamic. So that's the main way in which there's a note of caution in that approach. But mostly I think it's a very self-responsible way to say, like, okay, this is what's happening today. How do I work with it? Yeah. Thanks. And feel free to follow up directly. I know it's a tender question and respect on the intensity of it. Are there any others who are here? There's about 15 or so people here who wish, Monica and Ali. Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, I've seen in your Instagram feed a lot of Despacho ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you get into that at all in the foundations course.
Yeah, I don't per se, but yes and no. The basic form of the Andean or Quechua-speaking peoples, despacho, despachar, to send. I don't know the Quechua word for the ceremony. Was shared with me over a decade ago now by Meg Beeler, who's a teacher in California and who learned it directly from Andean peoples, and you know, a lovely day teaching with Meg that then gradually morphed into a further elaboration. It's not an improvement. I'm not like that would be arrogant, but just a more fancy and meticulous way
Yeah,
of.
they're very beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And it just gradually over time got a little fancier and fancier, and I'm a little OCD sounds judgy, but detail appreciating as a person. And so I say that because I want to make sure to credit the cultural origins of the ritual. I'm even wary to call them despachos at this point
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I mean, no problem, because it gives respect where they've come from. And some people have shown traditional Andean elders images of them, and they're like, oh, those are pretty, go for it. They seem to be pretty laid back about it. And so I don't see that there's a cultural harm in it, but I don't want to presume to be representing a tradition that I'm not particularly steeped in. What happens at the ancestral lineage healing intensives in person is that the teachers of those, which are where those despacho or offering practices are usually happening, are given ritual latitude to do any kind of offering practice that feels right for them, because I don't want to presume that feeding the ancestors needs to take any specific cultural form. And so we will talk about offering practice.
Okay.
And so I see that being addressed under that larger umbrella or principle. And, but there's, you know, we have similar things in a way with Eboriru and Ifa tradition or Orisha tradition. But we're not going to do offering of ram or pig or goat either. But so those get, it's a little more earthy for folks offering feeding plants. And we eat them, but it's not my calling to train people to do that. So there are lots of ways to feed the spirits, and the despacho elaboration style of ceremony is just one way. So I'm cautious to speak to the more general principle. One of the tensions that I have felt, I feel it all the time when I'm teaching, and I felt it in this course as well, is how to teach the fundamentals without encouraging people to unnecessarily replicate my style of ritual or my own personality with it, because I'm not teaching a tradition per se. The tradition I know most is probably Yoruba, traditional practice, Ishashe, and even that I'm not steeped in it enough to really train others. And so I do believe, I feel strongly, I know that it's possible to teach fundamentals in a way that can be really useful to others. But in doing that, I need to be constantly tracking for, is this a personal style element that I'm at risk of teaching in a way that creates a dogma about things? Or is it, or is it a more general thing? Like offering practice. People will ask, should I eat the offerings? Now, I spent a lot of years involved in pagan tradition, and in European lore generally, you don't eat what you've given to the spirits, most commonly. It varies. But if you look at a film like Pan's Labyrinth, you don't eat the offerings for the dead. It doesn't go well when you do that. Now, in Yoruba culture, it varies, but most often, like if we offer a ram to the ancestors, let's say, some small part of the body might go to the spirits, but that's food for the community. It's sacred food prep. And so it would be weirdly disrespectful and wasteful to not eat the offerings.
Makes
And
sense.
yeah, so a topic like that, I've worked within starkly different protocols. And so that's when I teach to offering practice and someone asks, should I do that? My answer is, well, there are different ways to do it. That is a style question. But generally do it one way and stick with that until you have another way. So good. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Good. I see another question from Anthony. Could I say a bit about trance and altered consciousness and ritual? I think we do almost 3 lessons on it in the course, so there's so much to say about it, really. Feel welcome if you have a more specific thing to ask about it. I'll say that I don't have the view that being in a somehow altered or non-ordinary state of consciousness is required for contact with the spirits. For a lot of folks just starting out, and then for others who have been in ritual space for a long time, the contact with the powers becomes really ordinary feeling in a way. Like you're having a conversation with somebody in the room, and you're also like, oh, the spirits just said that, okay, but it's not. You're not in a big trance state necessarily. So in that way, I don't like to make unnecessary barriers to relationship with the spirits and the other than humans than are really needed. I think a lot of the interaction with the rivers and the mountains and the ancestors happens in what we might think of as an ordinary state of consciousness. That said, we do talk about ways to intentionally work with light trance, whether it's through meditation, prayer practice, song, like activating forms like drumming or movement, or more stillness-oriented forms like different kinds of meditation. So we do speak to that in the course. It is, it facilitates spirit contact often to be in a little bit of a shifted state. We talk a little bit, but not a lot, about the use of psychoactive medicines. It's not something that I view as necessary. It's not something I particularly teach to. It's possible I may have had an experience or two with those in my life, but it's not a part of my practice at this time. So I'm sympathetic and respectful to folks who do utilize those medicines, but it's not a focus of my practice. So yeah, thanks. Anybody else while we're here have questions? I'll say, one thing I do want to say is in each of the 8 lessons, we talk about cultural aspects and including barriers to learning. So, for example, the impact of colonialism on the decimation of the framework for a lot of people on all this stuff, like the fact that we're having to reclaim a framework for relating with the spirits at all. And so we talk about that. We talk about the impact of gender socialization on setting boundaries with the spirits, and how you might have been conditioned, whether you're woman, man, genderqueer person, to be really caretaking of others, which has positive aspects to it. And it's good to be empathic and kind and generous. And if it means saying no to a spirit that's just like, I just want to nibble at your attention a little bit, just a little bit more. Please don't say no. Please don't shut me out. Don't abandon me. And so that edge where you actually need to be like, no, back the fuck up. And it's hard to access that because of your conditioning. So moments like that, or moments where we might feel afraid to experience intimacy with the trees or the ancestors or the deities because of all the ways that our human this life trauma makes intimacy scary. So we talk a lot about the way that the psychological dynamics between us and other living humans really easily get transferred into the relationships with the other than humans as well. And so with each of the, another example just to highlight it is around possession states. We talk a little bit about that. And even though it's not a focus, because kind of a more intense or demanding end of the spectrum in terms of merging with the spirits. But there's a lot of racism in North America and beyond, but teaching out of a North American context, that both idealizes and denigrates African and other indigenous peoples around the intimacy with the spirits that's often a part of those traditional bodies of wisdom. And it's like, I want that, but it's kind of scary and tribal and feels out of control. And so we give presence to some of the ways that that conditioning might arise when you are reclaiming your own ability to enjoy intimacy with your ancestors or with the land, stuff like that. So even though it's just one component of the 8 lessons, having the cultural reflection in each of those lessons is really, that's a sweet spot for me in the course and the learning. It feels important to just recognize the cultural space in which the course is operating. Good. Well, anything else that is helpful to say while we're here? I know Seda, who is a co-creator of a lot of the things with ancestral medicine, is here on the call. So if there's anything I've missed about the course, feel free to add that. And all the information's on the website. There is a reduced cost for people aged 26 and younger. That's what we set it at, as a nod to the fact that these things that I'm sharing about, I feel should be basic knowledge. Personally, I think it should be like a high school class of like how to just take care of your life ritually. Like, it doesn't matter what tradition or lack of tradition you're practicing from. These are basic life skills. And so I have a lot of respect and appreciation for younger people who are choosing to acquire these skills when you didn't get them. And so in that way, the cost is a bit lower as well. We have payment plans and scholarships and all that to keep the work accessible. So if you want to join, look into it. Don't let the cost be a barrier. Good. There's a question from Angela who writes in asking about the feeling awkward at ritual. Is that really a psychological barrier? Well, it would depend on what it's about, but I've spent a lot of time doing ritual in public spaces where people who are not necessarily part of the ritual are walking by. And it's a great, and just being like in West Africa, being like the white guy doing the things at times, and it stretches me. I'm like, oh God, I'm self-conscious. Like, I never felt so white. And I think of a time guiding a peace tree ceremony in Seattle in Seward Park. And I was doing some rattling or invocation thing. There were like 6, 7, 8 people there. And I closed my eyes. We're doing something for a minute. I opened my eyes. There were like 2 or 3 other people there. Just walked by and sat down in the circle. I'm like, well, that's good. That's different than people walking by and just judging. But look, those ways in which we feel shy about speaking to the spirits out loud around others, or being the awkward person singing or moving or doing what you're doing, those are really valuable edges to work, because it's reclaiming space for you to engage in a very normal adult behavior of working with the spirits. One of the most healing and lovely things for me, both in Native North American circles, Native American church and lodges, and also West African Ifa, has been seeing a lot of older than me cisgender dudes just giving reverence to the earth and praying with heart. I'm like, oh, look, it's like really loving older straight guys praying. Great. And feeling just safe to do that. Like, this is what normal like adults do. They touch their head to the earth and praise the ancient grandmothers whose bodies are the earth. Of course, it's what you do. So that modeling is well, is part of what we explore, and gently, and it's a part of the cultural healing of the cultural damage that we're down lineage from all the racism and colonialism and things that broke a lot of people's culture. I see a last question, and then we'll wrap up, I think, which is, how do the foundations of ritual course and the practical animism course fit together? Yeah, they're intended to be complementary, but they are different. And the animism course specifically looks at our relationships with the other than humans as a content focus. And the ancestors course looks at our relationship with the extended human community that's not incarnate right now. And the foundations of ritual course is more process level for both of those, and gets into how do you actually connect with, whether it's an ancestral guide or lineage, or the stone people beneath your house. And what are the common elements in either, regardless of the content of who you're relating with, what are the key aspects of ritual or relational etiquette that kind of hold across those different domains? There's some overlap, but in the rituals course, it is kind of process oriented. And what I would say about it is the skills that are presented in the rituals course could just as easily be like couples counseling skills, or skills for like navigating your friendships, because a lot of them they're how to relate with other people, many of whom are not human, or who are not visible, or who are elder to you or junior to you or whatever. And so we're looking at power differentials, about different kinds of ways to make contact and sustain that contact. So that is, in a sense, it sounds a little abstract, but the intent is that it would be useful to you, no matter if your ritual is with another living human, or with your ancestors, or with the local mountains. So, good. Thanks. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope people watching on the Facebook machine also feel well met, and we'll make this recording available somehow. And we give thanks also to the spirits of the plastics and copper and electricity and all the beings whose bodies are sustaining the ability to have these kinds of conversations. And I hope you feel moved to join us for the rituals course. Thanks.